What we're at the point of is becoming a new species, not just adapting to change, but dealing with the stresses of the cosmos and changing internally to go to a new level of complexity. But as we go to a new theory of complexity, we can hold more energy as well. That's part of the key to who we are individually and collectively. I'd love Marina to add to that, because I respect where she's coming from, and she is actually someone I feel is at that point of evolution. She is bringing in the evolutionary factors with her openness and her intelligence. So yes, Marina, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I enjoyed a lot your presentation. It was really scientific minded, but also really connected to the heart space. I wanted to start my presentation with my own, with the general explanation of what morphogenesis is. And it's basically the mutation of the collective genetic blueprint because of due to the evolution of consciousness of that collective, which is the orchestration of the evolution of all individuals inside that matrix, inside that integral, of consciousness, that is informing simultaneously. It's in this constant exchange of information or communication with each other, with the higher fractal of this species, So numerology and geometry, it's, for instances, the language of the universe. We know that we see it everywhere in physics, semiotics, and genetics. In this case, genetics will be the language of consciousness. And how these two relate to each other, it's that this sacred geometry, sacred numerology, it's embedded in the genetic blueprint of all life forms in the universe, which means that every life, every organism that exists ever in the cosmos, in its DNA, this divine life codes, blueprints of the Christ consciousness, of God, of Creator, are encoded in its own genetic blueprint. If it didn't, it couldn't exist. And that's why certain genetic combinations make it out to exist eventually, and some other not, because they do not contain these frequencies. So in terms of evolution, there is a point in time in which we as a collective, we deactivated the connection of these specific codes of light, of these specific frequencies. And so right now, because there is the birth of a new cycle of evolution for humanity, the sun of our solar system, it's starting to radiate really specific electromagnetic wave of photons, and it's in which this really specific, really intelligent information, light codes for life, are encoded in those light waves that are informing us of the next phase of evolution for all forms of life in the solar system. Because the central sun and the sun of our solar system, it's kind of like the director of this orchestra of evolution, It's like this fractal of the solar system that it's aware of all pieces of itself, and thus know what specific information to share, to radiate to all its forms of life, to all its children, let's say. And so, right now, it's really also important to make this connection between the genetic DNA structure and other structures of our consciousness, such as Kundalini energy, and the brain hemispheres, and the poles of the earth, the geomagnetic poles of the earth. In all of these structures, we see this polarity. We see that we have the North Pole and we have the South Pole. We have the right hemisphere of the brain, we have the left hemisphere of the brain. Well, this, and in our DNA structure, we have this form this shape that it's the same as the shape of the geometry of a harmonic, of the frequency that is a harmonic, like two strands that are intertwining with each other. That's the same geometry because it's all interconnected. So pretty much it's all connected, because when there is a Kundalini awakening, your DNA becomes activated, The Kundalini awakening, it's the intertwine between the feminine energies and the masculine energies, and it comes from the below levels of your consciousness. So when there's a Kundalini awakening or activation, this vortex energy, it starts to produce more fluctuations, to become bigger, to start to vibrate faster. And reach from the bottom of your body to the upper chakras of the chakra system. So this is when the right side of your brain and your left side of the brain are started to mimic exactly those that dynamic, that frequency dynamic. The right side of the brain and the left are interconnected. They are connected via harmonics. So this frequency and this frequency, they are always harmonizing with each other to create that experience of consciousness, because without one polarity or aspect of this duality system of consciousness, feminine and masculine, right and left, mathematics, creativity, etc., consciousness will not be possible, because that's the law of the universe. There is duality. Structure needs a meaning, and meaning needs a structure. You wouldn't have a structure without a meaning, because it wouldn't exist, and you wouldn't have a meaning without a structure, because it wouldn't mean anything either. So both of them needs to contain each other to exist, like a mirror of reflections. So when you are having this Kundalini activation, as it travels across the chakra system to the upper parts of your body, to the upper chakras, the above is informing the below, and the below is informing the above. So there is these two vortices of energies, the one that materializes itself, or that comes from the above to the below, and the one who comes from the below to the above. And that's when you see the Merkaba, the structure of the Merkaba, of the merged triangle, and the triangle that is looking opposite, to the, that is struck, because that is how our body is, our energetic body is presented. That's the structure of the two vortices connecting with each other and integrating each other. So pretty much the Kundalini awakening, it's about releasing all negative beliefs or frequencies that are not in harmony with your true self in the chakra system as it goes outwards, so that both of those vortex energies can harmonize with each other when it comes to harmonics. And in that process, the hemispheres of the brain, the right and the left, start to harmonize. And that's why eventually consciousness began to understand itself better. Because when there's a harmonization, a perfect balance between the masculine and the feminine, the right brain and the left brain, you can see, better the structure of your own consciousness, of the universe, because they are reflected, they contain each other. Both polarities create each other in order to exist. So you see, that's why you see that the pineal gland system start to become activated, because the pineal gland, it's in the middle between these two hemispheres, and that's when you open your vision and you are establishing these dynamics in your consciousness, in the expression of your consciousness, in which you start to become aware of the outside as you become aware of the inside, because again, those polarities contain each other. So there's a point in which these feminine and masculine energies of the Kundalini, once they become integrated, there can be presented another strand of energy. And that is exactly what a third strand will represent in a DNA that has evolved eventually to become to this level of integration of the masculine and the feminine. That's why there are beings that have 3 strands in their DNA eventually in the future instead of 2, because this level of duality and polarity has been transcended, has been integrated. So that's what may happen, will eventually happen in the future, that we will acquire a 3rd strand in our DNA. And so talking about, for instances, the becoming of the Homo galacticos, well, that event, it's like another step in evolution, another a repetition of the step that you go forward when you start your personal awakening, because it all goes in cycles of energies. And the structure of existence, it's presented itself in all levels of consciousness, because consciousness, it's fractal, it has many layers, it's multidimensional. And so the structure above, it's the same as below, and in all levels, it repeats itself. It's the pattern, it's the structure. So when an individual eventually gets to awake to who they truly are, they do it by reflecting with those individuals that are present in their own collective, as well as the ones who are below. There is those dynamics of exchange of information going on for the purpose of, eventually getting the reflections that you need about what aspects of yourself you're holding on to that are not in harmony with your true self, so that you can tune them, so that you can release them, you can harmonize them, and then become harmonized with the outer reflection of yourself, which is your own collective consciousness, your own species. So when in a species, this eventually is done, when you become integrated with your own belief systems about who you are in terms of your own collective, which is one of the first scenarios that you're presented to make this expression of consciousness, then you experience the reintegration with the collective consciousness of your own species, of your own race, so that you can then continue this exploration of consciousness and this process of integration of your own self, of more of who you truly are, but on a higher level. And that is what the Homo galacticus it's about. When you are actually operating in a 4th density consciousness, because you have actually achieved that level of awareness that you are one with your own collective consciousness, with your own species. Now you become the Homo galacticus, because now you're ready to continue that same process, but with other species that have also achieved that level of integration and realization about aspects of their own consciousness. So it will be a period of evolution for humanity in which we eventually will be able to interact more consciously with this other consciousness, so that we start to navigate more in higher densities of ourselves that are in tune with our collective consciousness. And so that reminds me of the idea of adaptation of the environment that Alan was talking about. And it's a really important thing to understand. It's the relevancy or the importance of a planet for this to eventually happen. Many people think that a species could evolve naturally in an artificial spacecraft or, outside of the universe or whatever. And actually, the point is that they will eventually be able to survive, but not evolve at all. They need a link to a planet. They need a link to a collective consciousness of a planetary matrix, because it's like the perfect scenario or environment for a collective or even an individual to have these communications, these dynamics of exchange of information and reflections, outer reflections, so that they can eventually achieve more understanding of their own self or of their own true self. So eventually, a species that lives in a planet and it's linked to a planetary consciousness, the environment represents this perfect matrix that has in its integral all these different beings and collectives of all different spectrums or layers of consciousness from different densities, like first density, second density, third density, fourth density, so that they all work together in this orchestra of exchanges of information and reflections, so that each individual gets a higher understanding of who they are by, let's say, making these connections, harmonizing these inner connections of their own self, of their own multi-layer, multidimensional consciousness into a level of harmony. So that's why in evolution we see that there is a change of exchange of energies. So that's why we see that second density, for instance, as a species, have to feed with first density, and the third density individuals or species have to feed or interact, with the second layers, with the second density and the first density, and the third with the second, and the fourth with the third. And it goes like this up to the higher layers of density of consciousness. Because, for instances, when there is an exchange of energy, when we eventually, for example, feed from another organism, the energy, the physical energy of an organism, we are not just exchanging physical energy, we're not just feeding from their physical energy, but there is a natural exchange of information, of energies, of consciousness in between the spirit realm of that species and ours. So eventually, this chain in evolution of consuming others' energies, it's established as a norm so that evolution gets to be possible, because the way that you relate to other organisms, to other species and other beings from other lower layers and upper layers of density, it's the reflection of how you operate, how you relate to those specific aspects of those layers of consciousness of with yourself. So in that process of becoming harmonic with those layers, with those levels of density, all those reflections of your own self, because you are everything in your reality, you're all one with your own reality. Those are all just reflections of your very own self. When you eventually achieve this harmony with those aspects, you also do it with yourself. So you get to evolve to a higher level of consciousness, a higher density, because you become more in harmony, in peace with those aspects of yourself. And that's what morphogenesis it's about. It's taken approach of all these different reflections of your very own consciousness and seeing where you need to make a change, where you need to become more in harmony with your own very own self or essence, so that you are ready to reintegrate yourself to higher and higher aspects of yourself that represent an integral of consciousness, a matrix of consciousness that encompasses, that contains all of the lower levels of your own consciousness in perfect harmony, so that you continue the process beyond and above. And to finish this, my presentation, I would love to read a little text that I channeled back some months ago. It talks especially about evolution. And it says, evolution is not an action of will. Evolution is a constant of the universe that flows through and within all of us simultaneously and at the same pace in the course of time. What it is a matter of action is change, the will of making the choice of deciding to shift and expand your consciousness to a higher and more integrated understanding of itself.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. Are you saying this is happening now because of what I sort of said, also the cosmic radiation, something's amping up. What was that factor that's making this a critical moment in history?
It's all tied to numerology and sacred geometry. It's a law of the universe. So because there is an emerging new cycle of energy, new cycle of evolution for the whole planetary consciousness, which is Gaia. All beings, all species that are part of that matrix, of that integral, are going to eventually experience this Myers shift. They are all, not just humanity, all of them, because we live in the one same matrix, because we are part of that same fractal that, you know, contains all of us.
So what is the essence of that shift? I mean, where's it? You're saying numerology, like the year we're in, which seems to be a sort of artificial creation, because really there are no years within the cosmos. So it seems like there's more cosmic factors to me, like galactic. Yeah, right. Talk about how they converge together.
Connected. That's the point. That even though years, it's a perception. The way that we relate to time, the way that we organize time, this goes all back into the history of Anunnakis, of how they presented the information about how we organize time, how we created our calendars, how we even get to size time and space in terms of minutes, hours, etc. That was not just like something created that we eventually came up with. That is knowledge, that is really intelligent information that it was given by the Anunnaki to us, so that we could relate to the matrix of space and time in relationship with what specific period, what phase of our evolution we were dealing with. So for instances, that's why there is 60 seconds, 60 minutes, because if you see the Sumerians, eventually they use mathematics based in 60, not in 10. You know, right. They gave us this knowledge because they know and they understood sacred geometry and how it relates to consciousness. So
maybe you can explain just one thing to me, if you don't mind, this convergence of 10 and 12, you know, those interspersing numbers that seem to be in conflict, that might have to do with the Anunnaki versus the other mindsets here. You know, the 10 and 12, like, you know, December means 10, but it's the 12th month. And so there's this shift from base 5 to base 6. And there seems to be this time conflict within the counting cycle that is this, you know, we're moving from 5 to 6. So talk about that a little bit from your understanding.
Sure. In my understanding, the fact that we use the 12 instead of 10 or eventually 13, it's because the Anunnakis understood that, or wanted, some of them desire, that we were trapped in the third density, in the third dimension, which is carbon-based. And carbon, it's the number 6.
Right.
So 6, it's all about polarity. It's 3 and 3. It's 3 of one triangle that is looking down and 3 of one triangle that is looking up. They understood that system of polarity, that it was 6. So instead of 13 months, which will mean that we will be in synchronicity with, we will be aligned with the number that represents the end of a cycle. If we look at the Fibonacci sequence, they made it the organized time. They gave us this organization of time, which is 12, so that it will be connected to the atomic structure of our DNA, which it was meant for them to be, it was desired for them to be carbon-based, so that we will be trapped in polarity. And if you look at the zodiac system, we have 12.
Right.
But eventually some scientists or astrologers are starting to realize that maybe there will be a 13th element in that structure, in that map. It's all interconnected. So we need to understand that astrology, numerology, our own genetics, like all is connected. So that's why there was 12 months.
Right.
It was given
Yeah, 13 is also connected to the feminine, 13 moon cycles within a year. So the 13 is key. One more question. So what is the big shift that's coming? What is the big change? When do you think it'll happen? And what will we become?
It's happening now. It's a process. It's the process of ascension. And as all processes and shifts, it's made of, smaller and smaller processes and cycles, because again, cycles of evolution are frequencies, they are harmonics, and they divide itself, in smaller harmonics. So what we need to understand is that just by going through our own inner reflections and our own processes of awakening, we're aligning with that big shift, which represents ascension and the evolution of humanity. So right now there's a pole shift, and the North Pole and the South Pole are changing its position. This is connected to all systems, all duality systems, as I was saying, electromagnetic fields of the consciousness of Earth, the hemispheres of the brain, the Kundalini vortex energies, the telluric lines of the Earth, all of it is interconnected. And that's why we are expressing and experiences this changing within our etheric light bodies, our physical bodies, and our mental bodies, and our DNA. So now we're in a process in which we are harmonizing those dualities, those polarity energies, the masculine and the feminine. And that's why we're so connected to the idea of integrity, of balance. We need to achieve that balance if we want to be part of this ascension towards the fourth density. And many people are becoming a little bit confused when it comes to densities and dimensions, because they often talk about going to the fifth dimension, and that is not truth. What they need to understand is that consciousness cannot jump over densities. The next level, it's the fourth density. What it has been said specifically about the fifth dimension, it's that it's a really specific frequency in which the Christ consciousness resides, the non-physicality, the higher mind, the higher self, because the time and space relates in a non-linear dynamic. And so it's a frequency of unconditional love. It's a frequency of pure light. And so what we're doing is that we are also guiding ourselves to integrate the fifth dimension as a state of being, but not physically. Our bodies cannot evolve to becoming etheric right now, because for that process to eventually happen, it will need hundreds of years for such mutations within our DNA genetics to eventually acquire, to eventually be able to express. So right now we're heading towards the fourth density and integrating the fifth dimension in our heart space, but not physically. You're muted.
Thanks. That's part of my evolution. But yes, I like that, because it is a progression, but we are at a threshold of something. Some people may call it fifth and maybe whatever, but we're at a moment of change. This is our moment. And, so what can we do? That's my last question, really, to be part of that change. What do you think, from your perspective, people can do to evolve in this new morphogenetic field?
Well, my guidance will be to ask people to focus, to make a perfect balance between those systems of the outside reality within of them, in the reality, and that reality within themselves. Because what we are experiencing right now, it's a lot of contrast between those who are too focused in their inside and those who are too focused on the outside when it comes to narratives, etc. And the truth is that we need an outside reality that contains a narrative in which we have a perfect scenario to reflect our belief systems in. And also, we need that internal focus to meditate on what it's that we are projecting and what it's that we are reflecting, so that we can, integrate our belief systems eventually, and to create, to mold, to shift to a preferred narrative that is more reflecting of who we truly are, or who we truly prefer to be. So by becoming balanced in between those two worlds within our consciousness, our third eye eventually opens up, and we see through the eye of the third eye, which is the one that sees our multidimensional self more clearly, so that process can become to be more effortlessly, more easy to walk forward.
Yeah, in the Gospel of Thomas, it says when thy eye is single, the body will be full of light. So there's that. Well, Marina, thank you always for, tapping into your inner wisdom and sharing it with the world. Anyone else have a question for Mariana? Anything you want to say? Unmute, yes. Oh, wait, I think I have to unmute you. Yes.
Yes. Yes. My one very important question for Marina, I think it ties into what you were saying, Alan, also is for the star seeds that are awakening now in record numbers, for anyone that is awakening, because we are in the process of a global massive shift. What do you recommend the star seeds that are going to be listening to this down in the future when they come to the terms that they are star seeded origin? What would you say to them? What would you recommend?
My message to those star seeds is that if they are connecting to that idea, if they are reawakening to that nature that they are as a star seeds, it's really, they need to understand that it's really important that they connect to the idea of their origin. Now, multidimensional, metaphysically speaking, there's not really an origin for a soul. Our origin is here now, technically speaking, and time is not linear, and we know this, so we may have different connections in one incarnation of Earth that is more connected to Pleiades and Sirius, but maybe in the next incarnation we're more connected to an Arcturian energy or an Andromeda. Now, this is true for all of us because, again, time is not linear, and every avatar, every individual is born in the now. So all of the multidimensional connections are converging into that individual in that now moment are arranged here now, as I was saying. So it all shifts, as we change, as we desire to continue to that process of reintegration of more aspects of ourselves. So there is really no solid origin. We have many different incarnations and experiences out there, but it is really important that they reconnect to those specific star systems or species or collectives of consciousness that they feel more connected to, that they feel that is more of an aspect of their energy, because they came here connected to those systems because their mission was to bring more of that energy, of those consciousness, of those civilizations and the star systems to serve the process of awakening and evolution in Earth, in Mother Gaia, so that by integrating them as part of who they are, by whatever process that they may choose it, whether if it's by the energy and the lessons that they apply to the circumstances that they have created for themselves to learn from, eventually to expand, with, they grounded in the matrix of the Earth matrix of consciousness, and that's how the whole planet benefits from those specific connections. That's how we welcome more of that energy, and it serves, it informs the planet of more evolved advanced civilizations that already made that shift, so that we have more, let's say, vision of how to move forward in our own evolution up to those densities.
Okay, Marina, thank you. And one last question. And for the children that are already awakened, the crystalline children, the indigo, the rainbow children, the diamond children, what message do you have for the children of today and for the children that are coming in the future, which is all the same, past, present, and future?
Yes, well, the children are the representation, the physical and mental and spiritual representation of spirit. They are the masters of expressing effortlessly that energy of joy, of, flow, of no resistance which spirit holds. So they will rather be the teachers for us than we to them. But my message is that they eventually accept and be them, as much as they can, because they only they are so in tune with the heart space that, you know, they don't really need like our spiritual teachings. But I will recommend them that if they find it hard, you know, to, let's say, harmonize with the society, with the structures of our civilization, that, you know, they take more patience and understanding and compassion, because I understand how it feels, because I also was not so harmonic with the structures, you know, with how our society works today, to the day of today. But, you know, it just takes patience. You know, they came here with their DNA codified to eventually perform their mission, so they know how to go, you know, forward in the shift.
That's something I see you really developing these theses and putting together as the manual for other people to study and take as a model for evolution. Thank you, Marina. Beautiful.